England is very much into spirituality. A lot of the literature comes from there, but they did actually find and talk about what made a good preschool or a good early childhood centre, and that was an important part. When early childhood educators take a holistic approach, they pay attention to children's physical, personal, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being, as well as cognitive aspects of learning. So there's a multi-layered way that they understand learning. Then we come to the first outcome, identity. As children are developing this sense of identity, they explore different aspects of it. And here, the document actually teases those out: physical, social, emotional, spiritual, cognitive. And they talk about through their play and their relationships. So it is directly linked to children's identity. And in the third outcome about well-being, to support children's learning, it is essential that educators attend to children's well-being by providing warm, trusting relationships, predictable and safe environments, affirmation and respect for all aspects of their physical, emotional, social, cognitive, linguistic, creative and spiritual being. So it's explicitly mentioned there. And then as part of the educators' roles and how that might happen, they promote this learning. Children become strong in their social emotional well-being, and educators promote this learning, for example, when they welcome children and families sharing aspects of their culture and spiritual lives. So just to have another way of looking at these references, two are specifically about children, that children's learning comprises a spiritual aspect, which is intricately interwoven with their other aspects of learning, and that children's sense of identity comprises a spiritual aspect. But it also assigns some roles or tasks to educators. Holistic practices recognise its connectedness of mind, body and spirit. So as educators in an early years setting, we do have a holistic practice, and that involves not just thinking about children's intellectual cognitive development or their physical and their body, but we need to be concerned with their spirit as well. Educators that pay attention to children's spiritual well-being, educators affirm and respect children's spiritual being, and educators welcome children and families sharing aspects of their spiritual lives. Now, this is just something to think about. We won't have our discussion yet, but how helpful are these in the practical sense? As an educator, this document's been around a long time and we've read these aspects. What do they mean? How does that translate for us in our practice? Okay, now before I explore all the aspects of that, I'm now going to read a story, and I'm sure as early years educators and people involved in it, you would know the story of Miss Lily's pink feather boa. And I just want us to pay attention to the potteroo. Do you think she is spiritual? Do you think that she has transcended herself? That's some language I'm adding in here. Do you think that she has transcended herself throughout this story? Up north, where the hibiscus flowers were as big as dinner plates and the trees blossomed with white cockatoos, was Miss Lily's tropical holiday house. When the last potteroo struggled up the steps of the holiday house with her big suitcase, she nearly died of fright. She had no idea that Miss Lily was a crocodile, and such a big one. During dinner, the last potteroo kept glancing nervously at Miss Lily's enormous snout and her strong, sharp teeth. She felt much better when Miss Lily said kindly, "I have a very small appetite and I only eat fish." Later that night, when the other guests went up to bed, Miss Lily asked the last potteroo to have a cup of peppermint tea with her on the veranda. At first, the last potteroo was too shy to say much, but she soon found herself confessing, "I'm so lonely. I think I'm the only potteroo left in the whole of Australia." Miss Lily patted her paw. "I'm sure that somewhere there are others of your kind," she said. "You must be brave. You must go looking for them." "Maybe one day," said the last potteroo, but she didn't know if she'd ever be brave enough to journey very far. During the day, the guests rode down the long brown river, went for walks in the rainforest, and lazed in hammocks. Sometimes the last Potteroo joined them, but mostly she just followed Miss Lily around or sat for hours on top of the hill gazing at the long red road that wound south. In the evenings, Miss Lily took off her apron and put on a fabulous pink feather boa and danced a tango. The boa, which had belonged to Miss Lily's mother, and before that to her mother's mother, made Miss Lily look splendid, so young, so carefree, so joyful. When Miss Lily finished dancing, she always flung her feather boa into the crowd. Once, the last Potteroo caught it and she draped it around herself, everyone exclaiming, "It suits you, you look wonderful." The last Potteroo sparkled, feeling for a moment that she could do anything and everything. It seemed to the last Potteroo that the feather boa was somehow magical. She started dreaming about it, and when she woke up in the mornings, she longed for the evenings so that she could once more see the boa, and if she was lucky, catch it and drape it around herself. One morning, while Miss Lily was weeding the vegetable garden, the last Potteroo tiptoed into Miss Lily's bedroom and opened the trunk in which the feather boa was kept. She only wanted to put it on for a moment, just to feel it curling around her. But, as if in a trance, she found herself picking up a pair of scissors from Miss Lily's dressing table and snipping off a piece of the boa. Humming under her breath, the last Potteroo folded the feather boa away in the trunk and took the little piece to her own room. She slept for a while, but when she woke up and saw the scrap of boa next to her on the pillow, she was horrified. How could she have done such a thing? And what would Miss Lily say when she found out? But the next time Miss Lily wore the fabulous pink feather boa, she didn't seem to notice anything different about it. The last Potteroo buried the piece of boa at the bottom of the hill. For nights afterwards, she was plagued with dreams of the boa wriggling out of the soil and dancing up the steps of the holiday house. At the end of the month, the guests went home, family after family, until only the last Potteroo was left. "Goodbye," said Miss Lily. "Goodbye," said the last Potteroo, struggling down the steps with her big suitcase. She didn't want to go home. She wished she could stay longer, perhaps as Miss Lily's helper. "Wait," said Miss Lily. The last Potteroo turned around, beaming. "This is for you," said Miss Lily. As she gave the last Potteroo her fabulous pink feather boa. "Oh," said the last Potteroo, "thank you." She wrapped the boa around her body, around and around and around. And as she did so, her eyes shone, her fur was gleaming. She felt she could do anything and everything. Suddenly, her joy evaporated. "I can't take this," she whispered. "I did something dreadful. I wanted the boa so much that I stole a bit of it." "I know," said Miss Lily softly. They hugged each other hard. "I hope she finds what she's looking for," said Miss Lily as she watched the last Potteroo disappear along the red road that wound south. In the months that followed, Miss Lily often thought about the last Potteroo. One afternoon she received a postcard. It said, "Dear Miss Lily, I can't wait to tell you my news. See you next Sunday and please make a booking for 10. Your good friend, no longer the last Potteroo." And taped to the postcard were 2 tiny pink feathers. Very early the next Sunday, no longer the last Potteroo and her new friends tiptoed through the gate of the holiday house and up the steps to surprise Miss Lily with the biggest hug ever. What a lovely story, and I know you would all know it. But if we look at the little Potteroo at the beginning and think about what she was like at the beginning of this story and at the end, Just think about this. How would you describe her in that final image, particularly if you compared it where she was so frightened? And I wonder if you could say she has transcended herself. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, with that in mind, I'm just going to go through, and I'm not going to read these PowerPoint. I'm just going to talk to them because I have sent the notes with you, to you, that maybe Yvette or Sandra will share with you, just the notes. Now, it's very hard to define spirituality. It seems to be unattainable. But it is widely held that spirituality is an innate aspect of humans, that we're all born with it, and it's linked to our experiences. And very strong, running through that, it is that core understanding of relationships with ourselves, relationships with others, the world or the environment, and for some, their relationship with God, or in other religions outside Christianity, you know, their ultimate or their divine, and with maybe people such as our Indigenous people, their relationship with the earth in that sacred spiritual sense. And such relationships nurture wholeness. An important part of relationship with self, identity is a core theme. And I'm going to say that again, identity is core. So it's very important. Now, with their relationship with others, the research is saying that it's more than just, you know, social interactions. It's about a very deep connectedness and feeling part of a community. And in fact, Bangert in 2014 writes that it's not just being part of a community, an aspect of that is contributing to our community. And we see that all around us, and we've seen that many times in recent times. Another important part is our search for meaning and our sense of purpose in life. And for many, this relates to transcendence. Why are we here? What happens after death? And is there a God? So all of those questions, and even children, I'll share some things with you about that. In addition, imagination, creativity and resourcefulness are very important aspects of our spirituality. It's a universal characteristic, which, as well as being relationships and relationality being important, it also has aspects of the meaning of place, and some people would have that, our connection to the people, to the land, or a transcendent being. Hope and optimism are very important parts of spirituality. Love and compassion, empathy, worship and faith are an important parts of it, meditation. And overall, a good positive spirituality and an understanding of that contributes to people's well-being. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this one because this is an important one. Bangert would say, who cites further research, is that essentially spirituality is going beyond ourselves, what he calls self-transcendence. And what he means by that, he understands that there was a whole section in his book, or in his chapter in a handbook about this, is that he said human life, if it's spiritual, is a journey from a castaway self, well, from a whole to a castaway self, back to the whole. So he kind of goes on and he talks about that. If you imagine the baby who's, you know, becomes life and is in the womb and is part of the mother's and the universe of life, is born and it's almost taken away. And he talks about the journey of that baby as it grows and understands its connections with other people, regains its wholeness again, and it returns, has this whole life that we cast away, but we become whole as we learn about life and journey right through back to our identity with the whole, that we become fully connected with ourselves and fully connected with our beliefs. And for Christians and other relations, but particularly for Christians, you know, that journey that we found our way back to our maker. And it doesn't require us, though, to lose touch with our individual identity. Bangert also talks about it contributes to our well-being, objective and subjective. And what we mean by that is objective well-being is what some governments would say, maybe what's happened during COVID, you know, if times are tough, you get food and you get extra money and all of that. But research that Erica have reported on is that it's not just objective, it needs to have a subjective dimension. they talk about a spiritual capital, and they did some research in London about people who were on welfare, and when they just got economic welfare or economic capital, they didn't do as well as people who got that and a sense of a spiritual capital. Graham Rossiter talks about spiritual, and this is one of my, favourite, not a definition, description, that it includes thinking and feelings about transcendence, a creative force in the cosmos, values are an important part, sense of meaning and purpose, love and care, sense of stewardship, and the aesthetics. So that's kind of a summary of what it is. Other authors talk about our well-being, your life view. We need to understand that for those who are Christian or those who may be from Muslims or Jewish or Buddhists, their spirituality is very much linked to and guided by their religious understanding. But spirituality is wider than that. There are some people like our Indigenous people, their spirituality is more connected to the earth and the way that they feel. So you could say that Christians, committed Christians, are spiritual in a particular way. Okay. Now, children's spirituality, it's an important aspect of their well-being and wholeness, and it's pivotal to who they are and who they will become. And I just want to spend a moment, Hay and Nye, David Hay and Rebecca Nye, they are the ones, I mean, there's lots of research, but they are the ones who really initiated such a big in-depth research study in the UK, and they have fed us with lots of insights. And they talk about every child as having a personal spiritual signature. So when I mention all those things, it doesn't mean to say that spiritual person has all of those. We might be more, we might have more about our understanding and compassion. Some people, their imagination allows them to maybe transcend and be more hopeful. It's not a particular way, and each individual has their own individual spiritual signature. And they talk about relational consciousness, which is, that relationships. It's widely agreed that there are distinct characteristics, that it's innate, that relationship again comes into that with those self and others and so on. And again, in terms of young children, it's not much different from a general understanding of spirituality, relationships, identity, connectedness, creativity, transcendence, spiritual experiences, and awe and wonder, which that's what one aspect that our EYLF document talks to. Just quickly, this is just one way we looked at it, earlier, that it was all these different aspects that we've talked about. That's a summary slide, which you have when I've sent those notes down. But more recently, in about 2011 and around 2014, there was a sort of some new understandings coming through that children have experiences and expressions of spirituality. And Bangert talks about an experience of spirituality and an attitude. And he says that experience is something that we receive, it overpowers, we become recipients of it. And sometimes, like as children, they can't actually say what they've done or what's happened, but they've had could be called a spiritual experience. But an attitude of spirituality is there's a mindset or a predisposition that engages us and opens us open to the spiritual. Harris talks about that in young children, particularly, we can observe such behaviours in their creative times, and that we can learn much from those observations. Meta McMahon had a big study of 5- and 6-year-old children over a number of years, and she said that children experienced and expressed spirituality through joy, concern for others, kindness, compassion and caring, relationships and imagination, particularly in and through that lovely word, play. And her research showed that she noticed and observed and recorded these, and they were not designed by teachers. They were spontaneous parts of children's days. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time here, but the previous way of looking at spirituality was that when we looked at separate aspects, but Goodliff did a lot of study and had another one from the UK, and he talks about children occupying spaces, imaginative narrative spaces, solitary imaginative spaces, and when they're in relational spaces. But he said in those times, they show what happens in their spirituality is shown through their relationships, which when they connect to others and show kindness and compassion, even words or physical gestures, when they're creative, when they're fantasy or they're problem solving and they get into their play, and when they reflect, when they're trying to make meaning of things and remembering. And then he says that transcendence is like shot through, that those moments of transcendence are shot through those times. So that's another way of looking at it, and it's more holistic and more integrated than the previous one. One way quickly of looking at that, I've just been involved with Townsville making preparing and designing a new curriculum, and after a lot of work and literature reviews, added to these the 5 outcomes from the learning framework, we've added the children are innately spiritual, a 6th one, where we look at that they show a sense of relational awareness, that children show a sense of reflection, they show a sense of creativity, and they can show a sense of transcendence. And we've, teased those out. And as you look at that, you'll see that there are many links between what you're already doing in your work as, implementing the EYLF document. You're already doing that. One aspect, though, that I need to add, and this is a much more recent, in the last 4 or 5 years, is that children's experiences also can have what we call a negative or a dark side of spirituality. And they can often manifest themselves when children they're doubtful, they may be having some anxiety, they're hesitant, they're not sure, and you know your children so much, you know those meanings, and you kind of pick up on those. And it can happen at times of loss and bereavement, or being disconnected when friendships break. Little children, sometimes things happen, and sometimes they have a lot of difficulty in expressing their feelings. So anything that we can do to give them the language is important. So I am right on 7:30. I know I've raced through that, but I guess what I'd like you to think about, and this will be the provocation we break open in a minute, is that we have our outcomes. Children have a strong sense of identity, are connected and contribute to their world, have a sense of well-being, are confident, involved learners, and are effective communicators. So the first provocation I'm asking you is, young children's spirituality is explicitly linked to 2 outcomes, identity and well-being, in those explicit references in the document. Do you think there are other outcomes, as we read through those, which could also be explicitly linked to spirituality? So what I'm asking you to think about as part of your discussions is identify the most relevant EYLF outcomes for nurturing young children's spirituality, and look at those, the sub outcomes that are part of the main one. And then if you have time, or you might want to talk about this, is in terms of the little last potteroo, identify expressions when you thought she may have been spiritual, and do you think she possesses an attitude of spirituality, and did she transcend herself? So I'll leave it there. And if Sandra, because we're right on 7:30, and we stop now for questions or discussion. Thank you. So, Sandra.
You're on mute, Sandra. Sorry, unmute. No, still can't hear you.
You can hear me now.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Okay, so I've created the rooms, and what I'll do is I'll open the rooms, and you'll be able to chat with each other for about 15 minutes, and then we'll come back again. So,
okay, so I'll just pop that up, Sandra, so people can see those questions.
Yes, if you like. I think it'll be there. I'm not sure, to be honest.
No, well, I'll just leave it there anyway.
Yes. Okay, so I'm opening the rooms now. I'm hoping that you can see each other. Can you see?
I can't see anyone, but that may be because I've got the sharing my screen with the...
hoping that everybody's there.
I'm here, Sandra.
Oh, yeah, I don't know why it hasn't let you go there, and it hasn't let Deb join either. I don't know.
Hi, Denise. How are you?
I'm good. I think the others have to unmute.
Hello.
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 Hello, Esther.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Rachel. Let's introduce ourselves and where we're from.
Oh, I'm from Brisbane. My name is Rachel.
Hi, Rachel.
How are you?
Good, thank you. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, love to see you too.
I'm not sure if I've done this right.
Yeah, thanks, Sandra.
I'm hoping I've done the right thing here, but I'm not sure.
It's all good. I'm sure people will jump into the chat function and let us know if there's any issues. Shari, where are you from?
Hello, I'm from Victoria. I was a student of Sandra's quite a few years ago now, so it's nice to see her face again.
Yeah, wonderful. Great to see you. And Esther, where are you from?
I live in Sydney, but I'm from South Korea.
Right. Okay. Welcome. Great to see you. So what do we think? What do we think about identity and well-being? Are there any other outcomes that you think children's spirituality should be linked to?
I think outcome 5. Like there's different ways that they can communicate their spirituality, whether through words or their actions or so I think it links to outcome 5 as well. It could
definitely. Yeah, using a range of media. Yeah, express ideas and make meaning. Like drawing and artwork is such a significant way for children to express spirituality, isn't it? Yeah. Any other areas?
I was a bit late, so I kind of was wrestling a toddler to bed, but I missed a little bit of it. But just looking at the outcomes, I think also the outcome 4 with being confident and involved learners with their sense of curiosity, especially where the natural world is considered, and creation, all that kind of stuff. Kids just have such a sense of wonder when it comes to the natural world, and that definitely is a big part.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and imaginative play and and it links together, doesn't it? Imaginative play and expressing using a range of different media as well. Yeah. Thanks, Shari. Any others? It's really helpful to hear how closely it links with identity and then well-being, doesn't it?
I was a little bit late, but I'm wondering if we try to explain spirituality to the children. Can they understand really, like spiritual, beyond the flesh? They can understand. I don't know. So.
Yeah, and I think what Jan indicated was around, it's really intricately related to all their other aspects of learning, isn't it? In terms of that whole holistic development, and knowing that their sense of identity actually encompasses that spiritual aspect as well, and how we as educators can actually affirm that and really pay attention to it. Yeah.
It's about that joy, the joy in the moment. You sense it so many times, or they're amazed, that kind of wow moment sometimes too.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't think I've timed these breakout rooms very well at the moment. It looks to me like we're going to have to leave it in about 14 seconds.
14 seconds. That's okay though, because we've come up with a few good things. So it's good. Yeah. But spontaneous moments.
that
So
story, you know, where the joy that little. Welcome back, everyone. I think what I didn't time this very well. I'm sorry. I should have in some way timed it for longer, and I'm not sure how to do that at this point in time, but I'll try to work that out before we do the next breakout session. I thought I had it right, but I obviously didn't.
No worries, Sandra. All good.
Yeah, so it was good for us, and I hope that everybody got into a breakout group, because what I did was just tell it to assign you automatically. So I'm hopeful that you mostly all got there. Yes. So that was really inspiring. I really love what Jan was saying about the relational, the reflective, you know, the transcendent and the creative. That's a really lovely way to think about the breadth of spirituality.
Yeah.
I
That's good.
suspect.
There was one thing I was thinking, Jan, I don't know your thoughts on this, but I know when I've been talking to the children about God, all of a sudden they break out and say, I love somebody, or I love you, I love, you know, there's this overwhelming sense of love inside, and they speak it out. I don't know whether, you know, I think that that's something that they're experiencing God at that point.
Wow, that's so beautiful.
So Jan, you're on mute, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, yes, that is, and as the other one of you said, that is beautiful, and it's so true, because the thing about little children, they have no, or most of them have no inhibitions, you know, they've not yet, they have that naivety or that innocence, and it is love, you know, that their friends are important, that their families are important, particularly those who are within those loving relationships, and so when we speak to them about God and we're introducing them, or their families have introduced them to God, and they use that lovely language of being loving and compassionate and kind, if they're using those words back, it shows that they may not be able to articulate too much what that means, but that's the journey that Bangert talks about. You know, it's, yes, you're right, that's how they come to understand it, and it invokes in them, if they're using that language, it's invoking for them a lovely, positive image of God. And I think that's important. And if you are instilling that or encouraging that in your centres, you're certainly assisting them in a really concrete ways to understand that. For some children, and I'm only speaking from the Catholic early years centre and childcare centres, some children come in and they may not be Catholic, they may not be Christian, or even some who are. They've come from families who want them to be there, but are no longer kind of practicing in their own faith, and are very, especially if it's a first child, are very unsure of how to talk to children. And that's why story is important. You know, I mean, that story of Miss Lily's fabulous pink feather boa, there's forgiveness, there's love, there's compassion, there's empathy, and there's growth, where she comes trembling and she's scared and she's got no age and she's got no confidence to travel. But in that one small incident where Miss Lily gives her that boa and wraps it around her and doesn't require any conditions, it's unconditional. And what that does for the little Potteroo, and she somehow, you know, how she kept saying, I feel wonderful, I can do anything, I can do everything. And that's exactly what she does. And then just quickly, because I know we're going on to the next section, but if you think about the story of Zacchaeus, when Jesus comes in and he sees Zacchaeus is in the tree, and Zacchaeus is trying his hardest to see Jesus, and the apostles arrive into Jericho, and you know, everybody says, get out of the way. You know, he's been the taxpayer. They feel as though he's been cheating them, and he probably has, and all sorts of things there. Jesus is walking along and he stops and he looks up at the tree and he says, Zacchaeus, you know, come down from there. I'm coming to your place. You know, and the crowd in the gospel, they're shocked. and Zacchaeus comes down, and in that moment, there's a moment where he is transformed and is transcended. I'll give everything back, and I'll give half my profits or whatever back to, you know, whoever needs it. And it wasn't about, it was totally unconditional. Jesus did not require Zacchaeus to say or admit or anything. There was something in Jesus that just handed out that invitation, and what a difference that made to Zacchaeus. And it's like Miss Lily, she gave the boa to the little potteroo, and what a difference. And you know, all educators and all people involved in children, you know, sometimes they frustrate us and they don't seem to listen, but if we can think of those two people, you know, particularly Jesus, if we're in that Christian centre of that unconditional love and what it might do for a child. Yes. So is there any, you want to say any more, Yvette or Sandra? Or...
I was just thinking of experiences I've had with children, both at school and in, you know, in prior to school contexts, where we're singing songs, you know, we're singing worship songs as such, and the joy that they experience as they, you know, engage in those action songs, and, you know, they suddenly get a sense of who God is, and, you know, and they're singing to God as such because they're being quite joyful and reverent and all the rest. It's amazing sometimes. You just get those moments, I think, from time to time of that joy and transcendence as such, that moment of relationship.
They almost have an embodiment, don't they? You know, young children, when they get into that, once they learn the songs and the words and they're confident, their whole, it's an embodiment that we lose, I think, sometimes ourselves as adults, but they have that. And you know, that's why we should always value and have faith in what we're doing. Sometimes we think we're not getting there, but those little action songs and those, you know, where they can get into it, and when one learns it, another, and then when they're all doing it together, you know, the unison and the power of the whole group, it speeds them on even further, urges them on. So I think that's a wonderful example, Sandra, absolutely, because little children do that.
I know I'm conscious that you're probably going to speak now, but just one more thing is it's going off your definition, seeing that it's the spontaneity. Sometimes I think, you know, you do something, right, but sometimes it's on a tangent. So, and the children do something else, sort of like 90 degrees even off. So that to me, I think is, and if it's good or right, you know, I think that's God as well. Like there's an expression there of God in that the children are doing, because it's not directed by you. It's you know what I mean? Like it's a very spontaneous. You haven't said, oh, you know, jump up and down 10 times.
Yes. They do that, don't they? And that's that research that Marta McMahon found, you know, that she saw those moments and they weren't directed by the teacher.
Yeah.
But the next part to that is to start giving children the language to be able to start to describe what's happening to them. But that's not entirely your jobs. That's the school, hopefully, the progress through school and family life, you know. But yeah, certainly.
Thanks,
Okay.
Jan. Sandra, I know you're on mute at the moment, but I think you'd probably, do you want to go? Jan can do her second session.
Yes, Jen. Second
All
session.
Right. Okay, so I'll start up. Now I'm just going to, can everyone see my screen now? No.
No.
Yvette, Sandra, can you see the screen?
No, not at the moment. You just have to share it again.
Yes, I'm just thinking that, and I've just got to end and just find my little button. Now I've even,
a bit fiddly.
Okay, I've just got to find my, oh, here it is. Yes, I'm coming in now. Thank you. Okay, up we go.
You're there. We can see.
Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, now, so going on then, we've had a quick discussion. So now, I'm sorry, we're going into part 2 where we're looking at the implications of it. And the the first thing I'd like to say, I'm just going to push this down, is that I've got these traffic lights here, and I just think it's important that we do stop and we do consider before we start going about what we're doing. Teachers' roles are so pivotal, and Margaret Crompton wrote a lovely book. I've got 2000 here, but it wasn't. It was 1998, sorry. A child's spirituality, if it's not nurtured and supported, promoted, it is lost. It's one of those innate qualities that, you know, she even talks about in her book, it's linked to social work too, that children can fall into a hole, a black hole, and we need to be aware of that. So we need to think about our holistic practice and our intentional, because these things don't just happen. And I know I've been in so many early years and long daycare centres that I know teachers are doing this, but, you know, sometimes it's good to become aware of these things. I'm not going to spend too much long here, but I am going to be talking about research. And that research, when I was saying, you know, teachers can think about this or that, most times they're happening, but when they're not happening, there's all sorts of understandings for that. And I'm just saying here, and I'm not going to go through them, but a couple of reasons as to why, you know, people find it hard is that it's not a topic that's often talked about. Children's spirituality is not a part of many teachers' undergraduate degrees or even, you know, postgrad degrees, professional development. We don't put much into it. So some of the research would say it seems to criticise teachers, but I don't take that on as all. It's just, it's not their issue. And I think, you know, your organisation needs to be congratulated on it by even, you know, considering it and what might happen. A doctorate that was completed in 2017 by Christine Robinson, where she was actually in Catholic early childhood centres, she found that teachers' knowledge and understanding of spirituality, rather than understanding it from a professional view, came from their own personal viewpoints. And many understood spirituality as a Christian construct because most of them were Christians. But that can be tricky, and I don't know your own, your context, but for many contexts in Australia, and in the Catholic settings, there are children from other religions outside Christianity. So we need to be aware of that. This research showed that teachers were unable to articulate their pedagogical practices and how they promoted children's spirituality, but they did identify play as being important. Their practices seemed to be more incidental rather than intentional. They were unable to recognise children's spiritual moments, and their focus was mostly on relational aspects, you know, relationships more than the individual or well-being. And this is an interesting thing, and it's something I've found that we overuse the word wonder, because wonder is about something we can't explain. Like, I wonder why Jesus stopped to talk to Zacchaeus. That's true wondering. But she said that she found it was more pondering. Teachers were actually asking more comprehension questions. They just thought if they used the word wonder, they were in spiritual language, but they weren't. She said it was more, although a part of wonder involves creating opportunities to reflect and to consider possibilities, at a deeper level, wonder involves mystery, which comes from experiencing a sense of wonder. So she's just asking us to think about how we use that word wonder, because there's a mystery to it and there's not a clear answer. Now, I talked about before, so we're going now looking at some holistic practice where Hay and Nye said that every child is born with a personal spiritual signature. Now, it's comprised of their sense of being loved and feeling secure. Now, I've got a little in some of these, I've got a little so what question here, and I just want you to think about that. What does that imply for your practice? So if we're to nurture their spiritual signatures and it's comprised of their sense of being loved and feeling secure, what do we do in our daily routines, in our holistic practices and intentional teaching to nurture that? It is comprised of their sense of loving and caring for themselves. That's a key part of identity. It's a key part of their sense of loving and caring for others, which we saw in many shut down cities, even in our own cities here in Australia. So what are we doing about intentionally nurturing that? Comprised of their sense of loving and caring for the environment. And for those who are religious, their sense of God or the creator or their creative force or whoever they're talking about. But in your case, if your children are all Christian, you know, what are we doing about their sense of God? Because that's an important part of Christian children's spirituality. Bangert connects spirituality with children's well-being. He's really promoting that it's very important. And these are the things he's asking us to do as educators, is that we really teach, you know, that early, teach children how to connect. Teach them about entertaining and making good relationships. What does it mean to be a friend and extending friendship? Feeling part of a greater group, reflecting on themselves and their own behaviours, being conscious of values and beliefs and how often we talk to them about that. Learning a sense of responsibility and that understanding of transcending themselves to be part of a greater whole. Like sometimes when we see little children come into a childcare for the first time or kindergarten or, you know, preschool, whatever, however we name this in Australia across the states, some of them come in and it's their first time of being with their children where they learn to share and they learn to give. And some children take a little longer to understand that. Holistic practice includes intersecting within a sacred space. Now, that's an important part. A sacred space is not necessarily, when these people talk about it, it's not necessarily where we've got our prayer table or a little, maybe the cross or the Bible there. That's an important part of the environment of your setting. But it's also that personal sanctuary Harris talks about, and that we treat children within that sense of that they have entered a sacred space and that they inhibit this space in the way that we talk to them. That we embrace all the interventions that will help to shape children's transformation and well-being, both for the individual child and then in the understanding of the whole group. And that we search for ways to help children to make sense of life, to cope with adversity, to find an inner peace. And I know that there's a lot of places they do meditation and the way that they talk to children when something happens in their lives, and develop an interconnectedness with their own spiritualities and with others. Solitude and mindfulness play in very important parts where we give children the time to be uninterrupted and to be undistracted, that we see someone really involved. Like sometimes children will be playing, they might be playing with some toys or a doll or you know, reenacting maybe a gospel story or a part of another story, and they're so involved that they're totally oblivious of what's happening around them. Continue that. Bangert with Grajczonek says that that's healing and it has restorative effects on them. The whole understanding of eco-spirituality, making them really aware of the natural environment. And I've just included one here, another research that Harris did in 2018, where she, using tablets, you know, your iPad or whatever they have, where she took children out and where they took photographs of the outdoor environment that were meaningful to them, and then increased their sensory awareness and connections. And even I saw in the news just recently where there's been this research for adults and two groups of people and asking people to walk in nature, along the beach, in the forest, wherever, and to focus and to be mindful of and aware of their surroundings, has done a lot for those people's own well-being and their sense of spirituality and how we might explain it. Community is spirituality, we talked about before, of that collective responsibility and that sense of social justice. All of those activities are very, very important. Another important part here is rituals. And I'm just going to read you this, is that rituals awaken mysteries and stir up emotions of wonder, reverence, awe, openness to new possibilities. Rituals evoke a sense of belonging to shared values, traditions, cultures and communities, secular and religious. So you would have your rituals. You may start your days with prayer. That's a ritual. You may do that in a particular way, and children learn that and then have a sense of confidence and a sense of belonging. It's like Sandra, you were saying before, that they all sing their little hymns or their little words and they get involved in it. That's a ritual. And when they all understand it and they're all doing it together, it seals the group, so to speak. And because you are in a Christian, you've got that Christian identity, that you talk to them about, you know, how that they're part of this wonderful group throughout the world and they belong to this long tradition. That's why important that we do give them understandings of this tradition, you know, at their age, but certain Bible stories and talking about the faith and the beliefs that you have and the importance of God and Jesus in their lives. And it's really important to include, as they move through the year and their times there, that they come to see rituals as having a structure, a routine, if you like. It's the same. So you might have a ritual, a particular way you celebrate children's birthdays, or a particular way you celebrate maybe the ending or conclusion of a particular unit or a project that you've been working on. Introduce symbols to them and actions, and you're already doing that. Words and their songs, actions and silence as well, all important parts. In terms of intentional teaching, play it just comes through the literature so often, and you know, early years educators and teachers are absolutely devoted to play and they really focus on that. But it's so important because children make meaning of the world through their play. You know, they might, if you watch them and they have free play and you watch closely at the language and what are they acting out, and are they problem solving, and whose lives are they trying to pretend to be, and it does help them to work it out in their place in the world. It's a crucial area where their expressions of spirituality can be observed. You can see their creativity. Sometimes their identity comes through. Sometimes you can see their empathy or their compassion. Sometimes, you know, you might need to think about that and identity, and you might need to step in sometimes and help them with the language they're struggling to find. Or if you don't want to step in at that time, maybe later in your observations, go and talk to that child about some insight that you saw. Pretend play provides a context for exploring and revealing who they are, or maybe even who they'd like to be, but it certainly opens their imagination. Bargwan talks about sacred play, and she said it flows from freedom, and it kind of, a few people here talk about this, is that you were talking about it, Yvette, about the spontaneity that leads to spiritual transformation. Sometimes we just have to sit back and let children, it's like called the flow, you know, that they get involved and we watch them and we let them go, because that takes them into new worlds. And it's like the last Potteroo when she kind of got involved and focused and fixated with the boa. It became a symbol for her and where that took her. So creating those spaces and those play activities is very important. What's important too is that you can sometimes, many people say let them play in free play, but there are times where you might need to actually step in and make them self-aware of their feelings, or make them aware of their curiosity, or maybe guide them in terms of certain aspects of the play. I mean, teachers and educators such as yourselves, you have this innate sense where a teachable moment may come. So don't let that pass. And sometimes we might have to step in, and that's important. And language, I was talking to you, Yvette, about the language. You know, sometimes they struggle and we need to help them and give them that language, because we know as early years educators at Vygotsky, he's really focused on this, is that language leads learning, and we need to help children express their feelings and give them the language to do so. And in doing this, you know, empathy and compassion are parts that come through this, and in essential aspects of children's spirituality. Now, I've come to nurturing, supporting and promoting children's spiritual in terms of children's literature. Now, in this story that we've done, stories such as the fabulous pink feather boa and some biblical stories, they foster this self-transformation in terms of themes of self-acceptance, responsibility, agency, power of connectedness, and forgiveness. Now, that's important, and that's why a story such as, it's one of my favourite stories, this one, but I've got heaps of, you know, books here. We just can't read the story. This is where we need to be intentional about what we're doing. It's really important that when we do something like this, that we take the time and help children, I guess, you know, scaffold children to understand what's going on. You know, what was the last Potteroo like? And now this is little character map. So you might show a picture on your whiteboard or whatever you use, the image of the last Potteroo arriving, maybe when she gets frightened by the crocodile answering the door, even if she's knocking on the door. And we help children in a very concrete way of saying, now, what do you think, what can she see? And they can answer that question. Mm-hmm. And what does she hear? The door's opening and this big croc, you know, you get them to talk about, and then you move into a little bit more, less concrete. So how do you think the Potteroo is feeling now? So we get that language going. We don't have to spend too long on that. And they name these things so that they're starting to understand the personality of this little Potteroo. And then at the end, when she comes back and she's got all the little friends, and we do the same thing. What do we see here? And what would, if you were there, what would you hear? How do you think the Potteroo is feeling now? And we think about that important time. And we use the language, and we maybe write the words, or wherever you're up to in whatever age group you're helping. And then you can ask the question, did the Potteroo change? And we might use the words changing, and they might be able to say more fully how they did. And in this discussion too, you might focus on the word, on some values. So for example, if you can think about that page, the image of her when she was dreaming about it, and she snipped off the little piece of the boa, and she goes to bed and falls asleep, and then she wakes up and realizes what she's done. And then on the page after, where all the colours have changed, there's blues and purples, and it's very dark, and there are a lot of shadows, and she looks frightened because she's realised that she's done something, and it's remorse. And so you could talk about that, you know, that sometimes we do things that we feel badly about, and we need to be able to give them the language of that, and then we can develop that word, but then immediately at the same time in that particular session, what does it mean to be forgiven? You know, somehow Miss Lily knew what the Potteroo had done, but she didn't dwell on that, and she came and she just said, take it. So forgiveness was there. And then once you've done those things, you can reenact that, like take those rich literature, children's literature stories that you do, and then maybe do some role plays where, you know, you might say, okay, well, I wonder what would make us feel, I wonder what would make you feel really sad inside and horrified at something that you have done here, you know. And you don't, so let's pretend we've got a little person here, and you choose a name that nobody knows, just a name that's not in. What could they possibly do to us that would make us sad and them sad? And they will give you a scenario. And then you think, okay, now what could we do if we were hurt? Do we hold a grudge? So all of this is where values are coming in. And this is why it's so important that we don't just read a story, that we read that story and we do something about it. And there are lots of strategies. And I'm not suggesting 1 minute that you're not doing that. But it's important that we be intentional about children developing values, social justice, forgiveness, compassion, all of those things within the setting, you know. And then sometimes we might need to do a little bit more with some individual children and making them feel comfortable with who they are and their identity. So those two things, well, three things actually. The identity, the first outcome in the EYLF document, identity and really strengthening that for young children. So we see here how the Potteroo's own identity of themselves moving away from a frightened, with no confidence, shy, not able to gain and get involved with what everybody else is doing, to a person who suddenly, because of that act of forgiveness, is sort of just goes out into the world and finds others and brings them back. So they've moved an understanding of their identity that takes agency and voice, two key words in early childhood theory, where she takes agency and she's got this understanding of self-efficacy, and she comes back with all these other little Potteroos. And so we see her connectedness here and all the friends that she has and brings back to Miss Lily and that wonderful reunion. So all of that's very, very important. And then mystery and ambiguity, like Tony, you would say that, and don't be frightened of those books where the answers aren't there, you know, and perhaps they're a little ambiguous. I'm not saying in a sinister sense, but there are some stories that they don't finish off and we don't understand it. Mystery and ambiguity. And that's where, if you've got some of those lovely miracle stories in the Gospels, you know, Jesus healing people and things that have happened, we can't explain those. And Hay and Nye would tell us we don't have to, but we can connect that to the story. I mean, a mystery here is a question might be, and you can use the word wonder. I wonder why Miss Lily gave the Potteroo that boa that she had, that a mother had and her mother's mother had, that it was passed down. It was such an important, but she gave it away. I wonder what. No one knows, but it is a mystery that's worth exploring with young children, and they will surprise you. And then they go on about developing this moral imagination and the open-endedness of stories, and that's where you need to come in and ask those questions that are open-ended, so that children can really, you know, enter into the story and see if they can come up with their own answers. Also, Marta McMahon would say that give children the opportunities to make their own stories, to make them up. And sometimes I find that hard. You'll see that most often in their play. You know, you can see the stories when someone's directing the play. Well, you'll be this and you'll be that. And let's pretend, you know, just some of my own grandchildren, and particularly Hunter, the oldest one, we used to do dramatic play all the time, and he led it the whole way. So it's very important that we do that. I know I spent a long time there, but I'm just trying to be, you know, as practical as I can. Drama, you know, and I know these are the things that you do, but drama offers children opportunities to experiment with different identities. And Tony would say it's an especially good medium. Zhang encourages teachers to create experiences of the extraordinary in the art, poetry and music. You know, just put on different kinds of music and maybe have that playing, and children can be painting to that. I know that you have a host of those. I'm not going to take time here, but I guess what we're asking here is that you're intentional, that we don't, because thinking what Christine Robinson's study found, that many teachers, it's incidental and it might occur, and we're not forgetting those incidental things, those teachable moments as they occur. It's very important. I'm not discarding those at all, but we're being asked to be more intentional about that. Harris would say that, you know, dancing, I know that you do that, and a variety of using symbols and introducing children to symbols through dramatic play and how they can come to those terms. So in this section, I've just kind of tried to be practical and show you the value of all of those things that we can do, knowing that 90% of them I know you're doing. I know that they're happening. I've been in classrooms where that happens, but it's the intentionality, because the research is saying that teachers, and this is particularly from the UK with that one from Siraj Blatchford and Silver's research, showed that good teachers can take that incidental moment, that teachable moment, and go further with it. And good teachers who are intentional watch and observe and listen and don't give the answer straight away. They know the questions to ask, or the provocation to make, or the prompt that invites and indeed encourages and propels children further along in whatever it is that is taking them. You know, when they find something and how you respond to that, in your day is most important. So, yes, it's almost 8:15 in your time. So I guess here, and I know we'll have enough time, Sandra will work this out for you. So we're going to come back to this, these outcomes. Children have a strong sense of identity, where they feel safe, secure and supported. They're developing an autonomy, interdependence and resilience, that become confident. And so each of those outcomes, connectedness. Now, the whole understanding of being connected with each other and contributing to their world, which brings us back to what Bangert was telling us, their strong sense of well-being. And one of those questions, one of those things that educators were asked to do was to be respectful of children's backgrounds and cultures and spirituality. It doesn't use the word religion, and spirituality may not be, because yes, if you've got all Christians there, you can make lots of understandings there, but perhaps you have an Indigenous child who is not necessarily Christian, but is very much engaged in their own cultural practices and beliefs and worldviews. How do you, in a Christian sense, ensure that that child's own identity within that, whether it's another religion or a different worldview, that they feel affirmed, that they feel connected, and that they feel not judged by you? You know, that's a hard one, but it's most important, and this document is asking us to do it. So in this next discussion, I'm going to ask you now to have a look at those outcomes and even the sub ones underneath them. And for each outcome that you identified, that you, as being very relevant to nurturing young children, outline a specific strategy, one strategy, a number of strategies that you might implement, which will nurture, support and promote young children's spiritual potential in an intentional way. Now, what would be something, share with each other, that you could, okay, I can do this tomorrow. This is one thing that I have done. I can improve that, or I can be more intentional. That's what I will do. Now, this one over here, if I work on that, I will do that, and I'll hope to try that by the end of the year, and then another one for term 1, 2021. Now, we may not get that far in your discussions. That doesn't matter, but at least supporting and helping each other come up with some ideas for that. So I will now just stop this for the moment, and I will stop sharing my screen, and maybe I'll listen to you, Sandra, and then because I think you understand that without seeing that. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So it says that we're opening all rooms again, and they should go for about 10 minutes this time. I've been able to increase the time.
Okay.
Okay, so Sandra, you've asked me to join a room.
I hope so.
Yes, I'm just going to
Welcome back, everybody. It seems like our breakout sessions have finished. For those of you who are on iPhones, I'm not sure why, but it just doesn't seem to assign you to a breakout room. I'll try to find out before we do our next Zoom session about how I can get around that. But at this point in time, I just can't do that. I'm sorry.
Sandra, I'm on an iPhone and I got assigned to a room and I got in okay.
That's amazing, because I tried to put everybody who was sitting there on their iPhones in the rooms and it just wouldn't accept it. So it's obviously my lack of expertise. Sorry, girls. But welcome back. I'm sure you had some great discussions. I'll hand it over to Jan. Do you want? I'm sure she wants to wrap some things up, so we'll give her the time to do that.
Thanks. Thank you.
On mute, Jan.
You for that. So I will finish up and I'll share my screen. Thank you very much for letting me know that. All right. So am I still fine here now?
Yes.
Good. Yes, we had some really good discussions, even in the group that I was, and, you know, like children's anxiety and how we understand that. And if you might recall, that slide I showed you, there is a darker side to spirituality. Now, we can't always be happy, but it's there were some really good conversations there, and a number of people in that breakout room had suggestions of how we might do that. But we need to understand that, and the more we get to know our children, and just listening to you, you're all doing wonderful things, and like that well-being, there's a word resilience is in that outcome, and resilience, we need to intentionally teach children how to be resilient. But as someone was saying, such an insight is, she was asked by her grandson, how were you anxious today? And if a child just asks you, they think, oh my goodness, how am I going to answer that? They should. And I think there's some really rich conversations that we shouldn't avoid the hard topics, but sometimes we might just need to say, oh, let me think about that. Maybe this, I'll come back and answer you tomorrow. Those sorts of things are important. So that was how I want to finish up, because it is almost time. But Harris actually, I wanted to share this quote from one of her articles where she said, talking about spirituality, she's saying, a transformative quality of spirituality is connected to human existence and linked to the body, nature, and relationships with others. And part of human existence, it's not all the good lovey-dovey stuff. You know, we do make mistakes, we do make errors, we can't always answer questions, we do become anxious, we might say something that we probably shouldn't have said, but we need to help children to navigate their ways through that. But she goes on to say, as a result of a spiritual experience, the fullness of life ignites the spirit with energy to overcome challenges, with hope, peace, and dignity. And I just think that's such good things that if we even focus on hope, peace, and dignity, because those three things are essentially, you know, all the things that Jesus said, they are very important. That, and the energy where children, if they come to know themselves and they become happy about who they are, and then they come to know their place in your group, and collectively they have that power with each other, you know, that efficacy, that agency, because they're surrounded by their friends and their being is absolutely immersed in their sense of belonging at your centre. And those two together enable them to become the person, to live the life that God intended them to live. And I guess that's what I want to leave with you tonight. And hopefully it's been short, and I know I've done a lot of talking, but I'd just really like to thank you. And I feel privileged at some of the things that people were saying in the breakout room. So thank you, all of you, for giving up your time tonight and being part of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jan. You have inspired us. You've given us a lot to think about. And I know that we'll all go back to our services and we'll ponder these things and we'll talk to our colleagues about them, and we'll be a little bit more aware when we're interacting with children, thanks to what you've talked to us about tonight. We just wish you God's blessing in your work as you continue to work in this area. And for all of you girls, I want to wish you God's blessing as you continue to work in your little sphere of influence. And we hope that next year we'll come back again next year and we'll have some more Zoom sessions. And I know that Deb will be asking you for some feedback and of things that you would want, but I think we've actually got a lot of stuff that we've talked about tonight that we can really start to tease out some more next year. Jan's given me lots of ideas there, and I'm really excited about looking into some of those. So let me say that Karen Petrie, one of our committee members, would love to pray for you all as you go in your busy way for the rest of this night. So thanks, Karen.
And unmute.
You better be able to hear me first. That might help.
I can hear you now.
No, it's a privilege to have spent a little time with you all this evening. Some faces I know, some I don't, some I recognise from last time. But yeah, what a wonderful time together this evening. So I'd love to pray for you now, if you don't mind closing your eyes and bowing your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you for this opportunity of getting together with our fellow educators tonight. And it's just amazing how we can do this with the technology that we have. So even though we're so far away, we're so close together at the same time. Thank you for these educators who work long hours, who meet challenges head on, who care about their work, and who particularly care about young children. May we be intentional about sharing and promoting Jesus' relationship, with children's relationship with Jesus, and supporting their faith development. And may we, like Jan said, may we provide nurture and support and promote children's spiritual potential. May all children we have attending our many services know that they are unique and a valued child of God. So God, thank you for the privilege we have of being a positive role model to children. Bless our work as early childhood educators as we serve children, families, and our community, but most importantly, as we serve you. Through Jesus Christ, we ask these things. Amen.
Amen.
Well, Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everybody. And a huge thank you to Jan as well.
Yes.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank
you.
you.
We'll catch you all next time.
Everybody.
Beautiful.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
So good.
Thanks,
Good.
Jan, and thank you, Sandra.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank
Sandra.
you. Bye, everyone.